Hey everyone, welcome to my thoughts and review on Grid, the newest title from Codemasters. As I booted up Grid for the first time, I was wondering what its niche was. What makes Grid stand out from the other car series giants like Need for Speed, a series all about customization, Gran Turismo, which focuses on more realistic physics, or Forza Horizon, an open-world automotive playground. What makes Grid different is that Grid is the first racing game I've played in quite a long time. Now that might be a confusing statement, and I promise I'll elaborate on it much more throughout this video, but first, let's talk about what to me is the most important aspect of any driving game, the handling model. After all, you can't have a good driving game if driving the cars isn't fun. I started my play session with an Xbox controller, running through the variety of racing disciplines that the game throws at you during the tutorial. During this intro, you drive a proper GT spec Corvette, do a little stock car racing, and have a run in a Volkswagen touring car. You can definitely feel the weight, power, and drivetrain differences between the cars, but overall, each car felt similarly grippy and equally twitchy and responsive through turns. The handling was at least very consistent and pretty satisfying when you nailed a corner or ran through the gears on a long straight. On a 1 to 10 scale of simulation to arcade handling, Grid seems to sit square in the middle. The gameplay settings allow you to adjust various driving assists and can tilt the scale a bit in either direction, but I found that the overall feel never changed too much. Grid's driving rewards you for taking proper racing lines, braking when you need to, and not drifting around every corner, but you still have tons of grip in all the cars, and aren't penalized too hard for making small mistakes or sliding the tail out here and there. Right off the bat, the cars were behaving how I felt they should, and the driving mistakes felt like my mistakes, not a fault in the game's handling. There were, however, some glaring issues I had playing with the controller. It was tough to feel when my car was about to lose traction, and when I did, making a swift correction was nearly impossible, and I often ended up spinning into a crash, which can be race-ending if you have terminal damage enabled in the game settings. Similarly, getting hit by other drivers was rough. Drivers have personalities in Grid, and some of them can be aggressive, boxing you out of corners, blocking your attempts to pass, and even in some cases I found pit maneuvering you. One of the tutorial sequences even involves you picking up the race right after a crash, seemingly enforcing to the player that it's okay to crash, just keep racing. That being said, there is a customizable rewind system if you like having that safety net. So in Grid, bumps and crashes happen often, and when they do, it can be catastrophic. After an hour or so, I decided to put down the controller and pick up my Logitech G29 racing wheel. And this was a game changer. The difficulty curve, which honestly felt all over the place with a controller, somehow seemed to mellow out a little bit and become more linear once I had the wheel. Unlike in Forza, where the game feels great on a controller but just sort of off with a wheel, Grid flips that, managing to nail wheel support, delivering an incredibly rewarding and more immersive experience. That's not to say that controller users won't enjoy the game, but if you've been on the fence about picking up a racing wheel, know that Grid is without a doubt a better experience with one. I was able to drift better, recover from hits easier, and just simply drive faster. The mix between arcade and sim handling suddenly hits this perfect balance when you plug in the wheel. Your driving inputs feel authentic and accurate, and it's still challenging, while the handling sacrifices in realism for the sake of excitement work to amplify every corner, gear shift, and pass, making you feel like an absolute racing legend. And that's really what this game is all about. Remember my statement earlier about how Grid is the first racing game I've played in a long time? That's because everything in Grid revolves around the drama, competition, and second-to-second action of motorsport. In so many other driving games today, racing almost seems to take a back seat to other focuses like customization, realistic physics, or just sheer car count. Grid, however, puts these to the side in order to focus on the fun and the stress of the race. Your opponents aren't just nameless cars being guided down the racing line, they aren't just obstacles to get around, they're real drivers with names and personalities you'll definitely remember. See this driver in front of me here? That's Leo Turner. He hates me, and the feeling's mutual. Each and every one of the 400 NPC drivers has a unique driving style. They have strengths and weaknesses, they make mistakes, overshooting corners, or even getting in race-ending accidents. They can get mad at you, upset a driver too much, and they become your nemesis, suddenly driving harder and more aggressively in order to beat you and make sure you get knocked down a few places. If you're feeling cooperative though, you can also recruit a driver onto your team. Again, each with their own personalities, strengths, and weaknesses. Some of them might be slow, but really helpful in making sure you're able to move up a few positions, whereas others might think they're too good for you and deny your commands to defend a position or go on the attack. I would have liked to see more focus on team identity and team versus team racing though, as it often feels like me against the world instead of my team against other teams. Nonetheless, all these systems make sure that you're always invested in the race and make for a highly dynamic driving experience. Each race creating memorable moments, like the time you cut off your nemesis, causing him to crash and blow his engine, or the final stretch of the last lap when your teammate lets you draft off of him and then slingshot into the lead. Every time you trade paint with another driver or hit a guardrail, that damage is reflected on your car, and at the end of the competition, those battle scars add to that race's story. Racing doesn't feel like a chore or just a grind to get more money or cars. In Grid, it's the star of the show. So let's talk content. Grid features a total of 80 different routes to race, taking place across 8 countries. Many of these events are just reverse layouts or half tracks, and after a few hours you do start to feel like you've seen just about everything. But it's worth noting that new circuits are coming post-release for free. You can play these circuits across 6 careers, 5 of which cover a unique car class, ranging from modified tuner to prototype GT cars. There are about 70 cars total to drive in Grid, and although that number can't compare to other franchises like Gran Turismo or Forza, the variety and selection is top-notch, and every driver should at least be able to find something they like for each class. It's a similar story with the customization and the car tuning. Most cars can select from a large number of pre-made livery designs that are unlocked by increasing your driver level or completing challenges, but with the exception of changing liveries and colors, physical and performance mods are out of the picture. You can tune each car's handling by adjusting things like gear ratios, spring rates, or brake bias, all of which make a noticeable impact on your car. However, other adjustments like ride height or differential tuning seem to be left off the table. These customization limitations can sometimes hurt that invested in the race feeling I mentioned earlier, as the cars rarely ever feel like they're really yours. I would have loved to see just a bit more customization and car identity here, like a variety of rim selections or maybe some exhaust options. The customization as it stands now is just barely enough to make your car stand out from the others in the pack. This theme of just enough to satisfy is prevalent throughout most of Grid's features, but for Grid, it all comes back to the racing. Even the gritty art style with the burn marks from exhaust and the dirt and tire chunks sprayed across the car's bumper, it all lends itself to the emotion and the drama of the racing experience. I'm gonna show my astronomy nerd side here, but Neil deGrasse Tyson has a popular story he likes to tell about Van Gogh's Starry Night. In it, he explains that he loves the painting not because of how accurately it portrays the night sky, but how accurately it portrays how looking at the night sky makes you feel. Grid reminds me of Starry Night. The handling isn't hyper-realistic, the art style is loud, colorful, and embellished, and some of the finer details might be missing or a bit off. But no other game has ever given me a better feeling of what it's like to race.